controls the political debate. And the media is controlled to its core. The Fox News debate that they had the other day was a joke. It was as phony could be. And most of the Republicans that watched felt the same way. They knew it was phony. They didn't buy it. That's our problem. Our problem is how do we do in our hearts what we know needs to be done? And this is why I always come back to this message. If the pastors in America don't stand up in their pulpits, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The pastors are the key. Yes?
Then they turned in at the end of 4 years and done the same thing. If you voted
If the Christians had voted according to their conscience and according to the laws that we've been talking about, the laws of our country, the laws of freedom and liberty, the laws of God, we wouldn't have hardly any of the politicians that we have in Washington, D.C. The problem is not just Obama. He's just one symptom of the problem. What has happened since the Republican Party won a landslide election and took control of both houses of Congress with a mandate to stop Obamacare, to stop the Obama agenda? What has happened? What has changed in Capitol Hill since the Republicans took over? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Why are the pastors not calling out these politicians from the pulpit? John Boehner goes to church somewhere. Mitch McConnell goes to church somewhere. These congressmen and senators go to church somewhere. What do they get when they go to church? They get nothing but a pat on the back. They get all this phony, complimentary, oh, it's so good to have Senator so-and-so here. So wonderful to have Congressman so-and-so here. Where are the pastors? Let me tell you what the pastors ought to be doing. They ought to be doing what Mother Teresa used to do. You remember whenever Bill Clinton took a visit over to Africa and visited Mother Teresa, who works among the sickest and poorest people on the face of the earth, people who are diseased, people who live with contagious disease every day. She lived among lepers. People would ask her, how can you live among these people? Don't you know that any day you could contract the same disease that these people have? She said, God's called me to minister to these people, and if He chooses for me to get sick and die along with them, I'm glad to give my life in sacrifice. Bill Clinton, President of the United States, decides to make a PR stop with Mother Teresa. Bad mistake on his part. Bill Clinton, President of the United States, most powerful man in the world. Teresa was about 4'10", maybe. She was a tiny little woman. Tiny, tiny, tiny little woman. Wrinkled, old, hunched over with age. She looks at the President of the United States, big, strong Bill Clinton, 6'3", healthy at that time, vigorous President of the United States. Mother Teresa with international cameras recording every moment. She pointed her finger. Well, she tried to point her finger. It came out like this. She couldn't open her finger. It came out like this. And she said, "Mr. President, it is a sin against God to kill unborn babies." You could have heard a pin drop after that, let me tell you. Where are the pastors standing up in the pulpit, pointing their fingers, saying, "Mr. Congressman, Mr. Senator, Mr. State Legislature, Mr. Supreme Court Justice, it's a sin against God"? Where are they? So I say, if the churches of America don't stand up, if the pastors don't stand up, sir, it's not going to happen. Who else? Yes. Right. Right. I think she did too. The point is the courage that she had to tell the truth to power. And that's what we don't have in the pulpits. Anybody else? Yes. Hi. I don't blame them. I understand. You know, I ran for president in 2008 on the Constitution Party ticket. I learned a lot. I learned how the especially the presidential election, I learned how rigged it is. I learned how that the two major parties and the media are determined to pick the candidates they want to win the nomination, regardless of what the American people want, and that they'll do anything in their power, which is substantial, to accomplish that. People justly doubt the veracity of our electoral process today. How many votes are truly counted out of the votes that are cast? And the problem is that with an electronic voting system that we have now, folks, think about it. We have hackers that are so good at hacking computer systems, they hack the Pentagon, the most secure network next to the White House probably in the world, the Pentagon. Hackers get into it quite often. Hackers are getting into the computer systems of our national airlines. Computer hackers are getting into government agencies throughout Washington, D.C. Computer hackers are stealing trade secrets from businesses on a regular basis. I mean, these guys are smart. And we already have video evidence of some hacking that's gone on in the Diebold systems of the voting machines at various parts of the country. We know that it's happened on certain elections because we have video, we have testimony from hackers who've come forward and said, "I hacked this voting machine, this election. I changed this vote to that vote X number of times in this election." We have selected testimony in that regard. How widespread is that? How many of us, when we cast a vote and we think we're casting it for so and so, how many of us know that that vote was actually counted for that person, or was it hacked and it went to somebody else? How hard would it be for a hacker to get into a simple voting computer at a county elections office? How hard would that be? I don't know the answer to that. You don't know the answer to that. Nobody knows the answer to that. But the questions that people have relative to that, I think, are legitimate. You know, there's one way that we could solve that problem if we went back to paper ballots and had verified paper ballots on every election. That would solve the problem of computer hacking. But mention that to your local county voting administrator, or whatever you call them, and they'll look at you like you're nuts. They'll say, "What? Paper? We don't need paper ballots. That takes too much time to count. We don't need that. Oh, this system is secure." I don't know. All I know is that we had in 2008, I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, no exaggeration, of people that called me after the election and said, "Chuck, I don't know how many people voted for you in Laurel County, Maryland, for example, but I know that in my family alone, we had 16 people that voted for you. And so we go check the voting record of Laurel County, Maryland, and guess how many votes were recorded for Chuck Baldwin in 2008? Guess. 0. 0. I had hundreds of people tell me that. I don't know how many people voted for you in Montgomery County, Alabama, but we know you had 8 people because they were in our family and we all voted for you. I had hundreds of people tell me that. And we go check their records. Every one of them, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. I don't know. I think the American people today have a legitimate reason to distrust the entire political system of this country. I don't even know that we have honest elections anymore. I don't know. After the debate, the Republican debate, if you call it that, the media comes out and says, our polling data shows a huge increase in support for Jeb Bush. Really? Are you kidding me? Jeb Bush, who stood there like the anointed one, hardly said anything, with that smug look on his face like, all of you guys can debate all you want. We know who's got this election in the bag. Jeb Bush? Polling data. I don't know. I know when I ran, we couldn't get the media to talk to us. They would not even recognize our candidacy. We talked to Glenn Beck. He would not speak to us. We talked to Sean Hannity. He would not speak to us. I have a personal friend on Sean's staff. He tried everything in his power to get an interview with Sean. He wouldn't have it. We couldn't get on O'Reilly. I had a CNN producer talk to my public relations manager, and she said, and this was the most honest thing that we got from a media personality in 2008. CNN producer, she said, I would love to have Chuck on one of our talk shows. She said he's got a lot of fresh ideas. I think there's a lot of things he says that people would just really be interested in. I would love to get him on some shows and introduce him to the American people. She said, but I've been told Chuck's not invited to CNN. Producer. Who told the producer? One fella on CNN invited me in spite of that. Know who that was? I was on his show as a candidate. He gave me a great opportunity to express our views on the issues. You know who it was? Lou Dobbs. Lou Dobbs. After the CNN producer said we were told not to let Chuck Baldwin come on CNN, Lou Dobbs invited me on. Lou Dobbs is a pretty independent thinker. So I got on Lou Dobbs. Guess what happened to Lou Dobbs 6 months later? He got fired from CNN. Just a coincidence, I'm sure. That's what you're dealing with when you're looking at the major media. And the two major parties? No. In the first place, if you don't have, now for president, if you don't have about $1 billion to spend, you're not even in the race. If you can't raise $750,000 as a candidate, the media won't even look at you. That's the one thing about Trump that the Republican establishment can't stand. They hate it, is that he's got enough money. He doesn't need anybody's money. He can just do it anyway and say what he wants, and he's driving them crazy. And I'm not saying I agree with everything about Trump, but he's driving them crazy for that very reason. Same thing Ross Perot did in '92. Ross Perot came the closest for a third-party candidate winning the race probably ever since Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was the last third-party candidate to win the White House. Ross Perot came really close. After, he pulled out and then went back in, and Rush Limbaugh and everybody made him look like an idiot, and all that kind of stuff. I heard Ross afterward on a interview with Larry King talking about that whole experience, and Ross was pretty frank about everything. He said, the reason I dropped out was who are they? They threatened my family. I feared for the lives of my family. And I pulled out. And then he had a sense of courage, and he came back in. It was too late. He at that time, he was no threat to the establishment. Did they threaten him? Literally, did somebody threaten his wife and children? He said so. He said so. Yes.
I wanted to know if you had read, or if the audience had read, the article in the New York Times prior to the debate, where apparently the word on the street was that the heavy hitters, the big contributors to the other candidates, had told Fox to destroy Trump at all costs.
It was obvious, wasn't it?
That was so obvious. Our first question out of the
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah, Megyn Kelly, she absolutely was appointed the assassin, the assassin of Trump that night. But he didn't become a multi-billionaire by his own devices by being dumb. And he made Megyn look pretty stupid. And now Megyn is taking an extended vacation from Fox News. I don't know what that's all about. Take your own conclusion. But anyway. Yes, sir.
The other side would have brought all that out against Trump. Once it's brought out right at the beginning, and on it's over.
What are you referring to specifically? I'm not sure.
I think the Democrats would have brought these same things to Trump that Megyn and different ones brought out against Trump, so to speak. I think the other side, the Democrats would have brought the same thing out eventually. He got the nomination.
That's I don't know how to answer that. In my opinion, absent a miracle of God, the two parties are so controlled that only a controlled candidate is going to win the election or the nomination. And so for example, folks. Personal opinion. That's all it's worth. It's just personal opinion. I believe George H.W. Bush intended to lose the election to Bill Clinton. I believe that with all of my heart, with all of my soul. I remember being at a meeting with Dan Quayle not too many weeks after the election was over. And Dan Quayle made a statement in that meeting that I've never forgotten, and I thought it was striking. And he just said it, and then he moved on. But here's what he said. He said, this most recent campaign of ours, Bush and Quayle, was the greatest non-campaign to ever exist. That was his quote. The greatest non-campaign to ever exist. This is coming from the vice presidential candidate. I don't know. What comes out and what doesn't come out in these elections has a lot to do with what the media and the intelligentsia elite want to come out. I mean, come on. Everybody knows where Barack Obama was born. Everybody knows his birth certificate was forged. Everybody knows he never went to college where he said he did and when he said he did. There isn't a professor, there isn't a student that was there at the time that could confirm that they ever saw the guy. Where's the media to expose this stuff? Where was the Republican Party when Barack Obama was running the first time to expose all of this? Why didn't the Republican Party? Why didn't John McCain expose it? Why didn't Mitt Romney expose it? They said nothing. They said nothing. So when you get to talking about, will they expose this and will they expose that? Let me tell you, it's my opinion that the vast majority of these people in Washington, D.C. have so many skeletons in their closet. They're scared to death to expose too much on the other side, because if they do, they'll get exposed for their skeletons. They're all compromised. Not all. Most of them are compromised. They dare not say too much, or they'll be exposed. That's my opinion.
Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders, either one becomes too much of a threat. How far do you think those go to stop them?
If they are not controlled, and that's the big question. Are they really controlled or not? Is Trump really controlled opposition or not? If he's truly not controlled, of course, then if he got too far, I think his life would probably be at risk. If he's truly controlled, then he's just an actor. But how far would the power elite go? They shot Ronald Reagan after he first got president. Ronald Reagan was probably the most independent-minded, freedom-oriented president that we've had. Candidate that we've had, except for Ron Paul, in modern memory. And how long did it take after he was elected to get shot? A few weeks, a couple months? What was it? I don't remember. It wasn't very long. George Wallace got shot whenever his campaign was taking off back in the 60s. Agree with them or not, I'm not taking a position. I'm just saying, when you have a uncontrolled candidate who starts making serious waves on the national level, they are at risk. There's no question about it. That doesn't mean that God's superintending grace and protection can't prevail. God has kept our friend Ron Paul on the firing line for a lot of years, and I know that Ron never really got that close to the nomination, but there for a while his nomination his campaign was extremely effective and very, very, very strong. These are unanswerable questions. I just believe personally that right now, if we don't have the pulpits of America preaching the truth and taking a stand, there's no hope in politics. I just don't think it's going to happen in politics. Yes, sir. Judge. Oh, yes.
Could it ever occur and that possibly that could be used all at midnight saying if you don't vote this way?
I've thought that same thing so often. And when I was running for president, of course, you're running as a third party. You've got no money. After Ron Paul endorsed me, we did start to pick up a lot of support and campaign contributions, et cetera, et cetera. But still, what's it compare to what you're up against? But I was thinking, because I've heard that, and I've thought that so much. That phone call in the middle of the night, or maybe your first day of elected office, the visit that you might get from whoever they are, saying, here's what you will and will not do, or else. You remember Jesse Ventura talked a little bit about that after he was first elected governor. He got a visit from the Secret Service, and they wanted to know, wait a minute, we don't really know who you are, and we weren't expecting you to win this election, and we just want you to know that we're here to, find out what you're all about. And Jesse talked about that. And basically, Jesse Ventura told the Secret Service to go to Hades and get out of his office. I like Jesse Ventura. I don't agree with him on a lot of stuff, but I still like him. And I wondered about that, and so I thought to myself, I would love to be the guy that wins an election just to find out if that's really true. I'd love to get that phone call, or I'd love to have that person walk into the office. Buddy, I would seal myself into the White House, get the independent press in there with the cameras rolling, and I would tell the whole world and then never leave the White House. And then I'd fire all the Secret Service and hire my own guys. Oh, just go to my website, chuckbaldwinlive.com. chuckbaldwinlive.com, and there's a place there that you can subscribe free. All you got to do is give us your email, and there's no charge, and it'll come to you every week, once a week. Wouldn't that be great, though, if you could be in that position? I mean, I'd love that. I don't know. John Kennedy said about, 2 weeks before he died, that he had discovered a conspiracy to steal the liberties of the American people, and he was bound and determined to expose it to the world. And 2 or 3 weeks later, he was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. I don't know. Had a brigadier general, a good friend of mine who lives near Las Vegas. He worked at the Pentagon. He worked at the White House. And he flew every plane the Air Force had at the time. And he told me there were 3 reasons why John F. Kennedy was killed. He said, number one, he was killed because he wanted to dismantle the Federal Reserve. Number 2, he was killed because he wanted to bring the troops home from Vietnam. And number 3, he was killed because he wanted to dismantle the Federal Reserve System. And he said that's why he was killed. I don't know. That's what the Brigadier General told me. Anybody else? The fear of God, a humble heart and the fear of God is, I think, the biggest thing we should look for. If a man doesn't have a humble heart and he doesn't have the fear of God, I think all the rest of it is irrelevant. No matter how knowledgeable, no matter how successful, how smart. And that's what David was saying. If you don't have a humble heart and the fear of God, you're not qualified to lead people. And I think that's the biggest missing ingredient. And that's the thing that, again, agree with him or not agree with him, that's one of the things that made Ron Paul so attractive. You know, I knew him personally. I still do. He is genuinely one of the most humble, God-fearing men I've ever met in my life. And I don't agree with him on every single issue. I don't have to. But truly, there was a humility and a fear of God that was very evident in his life. And quite frankly, it's very hard to find those ingredients in any politician, Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative. And really, if you don't have a humble heart and a fear of God in your heart, then you are vulnerable to pride, arrogancy, power, all of the vices of the human flesh. You know, you're susceptible to all of that. It's the fear of God and a humble heart that prevent that. Yes. Well, why didn't they talk about John McCain? I mean, when you look at it strictly, it depends on how strict you want to interpret the natural born citizen requirement. Obviously, the legal scholars are going to debate on the strictness of that. And, you know, some will say, well, as long as your father was an American citizen, you're eligible. Others will say, well, as long as both parents were American citizen, you're eligible. Others will say, no, you have to be born on actual U.S. soil. Well, John McCain was born on a military base in another country. I mean, it depends on how strict you want to interpret that requirement. You know, Ted Cruz, of course, his father was not an American, and he was born in Canada. So, you know, there's people that say he's not qualified. But, you know, again, if the Republican Party and the American media ignored the obvious forgery of the birthplace of Barack Obama, who's now elected president of the United States twice, do you really think they're going to make an issue about Ted Cruz? Come on, I mean, again, they just won't address certain issues. They're third rail issues. They just won't talk about them. Who will? Well, that's the problem, though. Yeah, that's the problem. Why didn't George H.W. Bush bring up all of the shenanigans of Bill Clinton in that election in '92? Bill Clinton was the most compromised, corrupted candidate for president in modern memory. I mean, there was so much dirt on that guy. He was dripping with dirt. George Bush knew about it. George Bush knew about it. He said nothing. For the entire campaign, he said nothing. That's the least of it, my friend. That's the least of it, my friend. Oh, so much we could talk about. I sat down with one of the best friends of Bill Clinton. He was the chief of security for Bill Clinton while he was governor of Arkansas. They grew up together from childhood. His wife was the nanny of Chelsea when Chelsea was a little girl. They were tight friends all the way from childhood. Worked together when he became governor. He became chief of security. He went on to become CIA, part of the MENA operation, flying in and out of MENA, Arkansas. The drugs that were going in and out of MENA under the auspices of both Bill Clinton, governor of Arkansas, and George H.W. Bush, president of the United States. They both were in on it. And I sat down across the table from L.D. Brown and we talked about it. And he said, Chuck, he wrote his book and he told some of the stuff that went on and some of the corruption and everything. And he said, I was doing my radio talk show then back in the 90s, and he said, Chuck, if you get on the radio and if you tell your audience the things I've told you across this table at Cracker Barrel, he said, I'll just call you a liar and you'll be permanently forever discredited. I'll just call you a liar. If I go public with all of this information that I know, he said, my wife and my family will not be able to hide anywhere in this world. We would not live a week. Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush were both in on it. In my opinion, the Bush families and the Clinton families are a crime syndicate. They are a crime syndicate. And if we are stuck with a Bush-Clinton election in 2016, I won't be voting for either one of them. I'll tell you that for sure. One is corrupt as the other. In fact, as I said last night, between the two, I think George Bush is more dangerous than Hillary Clinton. Because first of all, what did I say, George? Jeb. Because Jeb Bush is smarter. A smart criminal is more dangerous than a dumb criminal. Hillary's never been that bright. I'll make a prediction to you. Hillary Clinton will not be the Democrat nominee in 2016. She won't be. Jeb might be the Republican, but Hillary won't be the Democrat nominee. She won't. And well, the media has done everything they can to protect her, but the corruption is coming out to the point that they're having a real hard time hiding it. And this Benghazi thing is going to ultimately take down her campaign. I don't think she'll be the nominee. But that doesn't make me feel any better. If you get Jeb Bush as the candidate, then whoever the Democrats put up is going to be better than Jeb. I don't care who it is. You put Bernie Sanders, I'd vote for Bernie Sanders before I'd vote for Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush is dangerous to this country. But, I don't know.
I'm curious to know what your opinion is of Vladimir Putin. Is he a Christian man, or is he just the Russian version of our leaders?
That's a tough call. Let's put it this way. Vladimir Putin is making our American politicians look pagan. He's done a terrific job of casting himself as a Christian leader. Christianity is encouraged in Russia. The churches are given great latitude. He encourages Christian morality in the country. The churches of Russia love Putin. They love him. They think he is a great Christian man. Is he really, or is he a KGB fella who knows how to play the system and knows what he needs to do in international politics to make himself in a stronger position? Only God knows. I don't know. I know one thing. I believe this much about him. He's nobody to mess with. He is one tough cookie. And right now, our NATO forces are pushing him to the wall. And if we're not careful, we're inviting a nuclear war. And I'm concerned about that. I'm very concerned about that. Russia is the one country that has nuclear capability, intercontinental ballistic missiles. Even China doesn't have the ICBMs that Russia does. Russia has the capability of hitting any target anywhere in the United States of America at any time, multiple times. And if we push Putin too far, what will he do? I don't know. I think it's a very dangerous game that the international globalists are playing over there in Europe. And they're doing the same thing in the Middle East. And of course, Russia is already backing off on Iran. I think Putin is smart not to want to go to war over Iran. I think he's too smart to be sucked into that. I think that's one of the things that they're trying to do, the globalists. They're trying to suck him into war in Iran. He's not going to do it. But when you start putting up aggressive forces around his borders, what would we do if Russia or China started putting up aggressive forces on the border with Mexico or Canada? I mean, look what happened in the Bay of Pigs with Cuba, years ago. What would we do? Well, that's what NATO's doing with Russia right now. They're provoking Putin big time. Well, I don't know what he's going to do. I'm not sure how he's going to react. I think he's smart. I think he's tough. Right now, public opinion is gravitating toward Russia and China and away from the United States. They're playing the PR game, and they're winning it right now. America looks like the mobster. We look like the gangster around the world, and they look like the ones that are defending the homeland kind of thing, the virtuous ones that are protecting morality and all those kind of things. I don't know. I have no way of knowing. I can't read his heart. I have no idea. You all have been really, really kind and really great. And let's go ahead and let you go home. And thank you very much for being here. And God bless you. And keep praying for this pastor and for this church. All right. God bless you, folks.